Welcome back. Here's a quick guide on how to set up 3DS emulation on the AYN Thor. So, as we've done in all of my previous videos, we're going to go to Obtainium and we're going to be grabbing an app called Azahar. There it is, right at the top. We'll give that a little install, shouldn't take too long. Okay, there we are, so let's open it up. Now this has a setup wizard that's pretty straightforward, so we're going to get started. Make sure you enable any of the necessary permissions that it asks for. Don't know why it asks for camera when we don't have one. So for our user folder, that's going to be where Azahar stores a lot of its data, and then for applications, that's going to be our normal ROMs folder. Why they've called it applications, your guess is as good as mine. So for our user folder, I'm just going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it Azahar. There we go, and we're going to use that one. Okay, and then for applications, so if you're using the ESDE folder layout, then it's N3DS is the folder you're looking for. There it is. Not sure why it's not just 3DS, but again, your guess is as good as mine. So I've got no games in there currently. We'll be moving one over later in the video. So there we go. So let's go to our options on the top right here, and then we're going to go through our settings. So for general, these you can just leave on the defaults. So for these system settings, a lot of them are more to do with the internal 3DS stuff. Those of you who owned a 3DS will probably be familiar with a lot of these. For example, you've got your play coins, the pedometer, you can set your birthday and the clock. Personally, I don't really tend to bother with any of this because I usually boot these games through a front end, so it just boots straight into the game, but you can have a play around if you like. Camera, we don't need to touch because we don't have a camera. Gamepad, this is where we're going to set our controls. Now you can auto map and it should just take you through this wizard where we can just press, oh, it did it all for us. So we press one button and then it seems to have mapped them and it looks okay. So we don't need to map these up, down, left, right buttons, only if you're having issues with the axes on this option here. That all looks good. For hotkey enable, I'm going to press my trusty select, same as I did in RetroArch, and then for turbo speed, I'm just going to set my right trigger. And everything else, probably do swap screens as well on the left trigger. So now for graphics, this does have Vulkan, so we're just going to leave that on the default. And then you want to enable asynchronous shader compilation. So what this will do is it will compile a lot of the shaders in the background, which usually does make for a smoother experience. You can get some temporary glitches. If that's the case, you can disable this, but I like to leave it on. For internal resolution, then as always, set this to as close to your device resolution as possible. So I'm just going to go for 4 times native. You can enable integer scaling. So what this will do is if you have a 2D game or a pixel-based game, it will scale the pixels up by a whole number. It's quite complicated stuff. I'm just going to leave it unchecked for now. And you can also enable texture filters, so these are basically your shaders. I don't use any of these, so have a play around. And then I'm not going to be doing any stereoscopic 3D because this is just a 2D screen, so it's pointless. So I've mentioned before, so you can load custom textures if you want to. However, with the upscaling and with a screen of this size, the texture packs I've tried, the difference was barely noticeable, so it wasn't worth the effort. But if you want to, then you're more than welcome to. So for layout, we'll leave this on original for now, and then I'll show you how to set it up on the dual screens. Because it does come with some built-in layouts, which I'll show you later as well. So we will come back to this in a moment. Audio, you can leave as is. Debug, you don't really need to touch. The hardware shader and JIT is already enabled. A lot of this is for debugging and testing. If you've seen my earlier videos, then you'll probably have heard me mention Turnip Drivers. Azahar is an emulator where we can use Turnip Drivers in this GPU driver manager. Some emulators will automatically fetch them for you, but in this case, we're going to have to get them ourselves. Now, there are 2 Turnip Drivers that I usually use. If we go to Obtainium and we scroll all the way down to where it says Track Only, we have these 2. We've got our Arduino Tools drivers by Stephen MXZ, and we have the Mr. Purple Turnip drivers. With Turnip drivers, some can work better than others on certain games, so I advise getting both. So we're going to tap into them, and because it's a track-only field in Obtainium, it won't download them for us, but it will give us the link there. So we'll tap onto that, and then we can just go to our releases. For the AYN Thor, you want to make sure that you get one for the Adreno A7XX, which is the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. So we'll get we don't need the One UI version, so we'll get that one. And then we'll back out, we'll go back to Obtainium, we'll go to Mr. Purple Turnip, and we'll get his as well. So once we're back in Azahar, we can go to our GPU driver manager and press this install button, and then we can grab the first one and then the second one. So all you need to do is, if you try one on a game and it doesn't work, come to this menu and then just tap the other one, make sure it's selective. Sometimes the system driver is perfectly fine, so we'll stick with the Steven MXZ one first because that usually performs a little bit better, but if not, the Mr. Purple is a great backup. So you can also modify the theme and colour. So you can set Material U, which will use the operating system's theme, or you can set a custom colour, you can set a light mode if you prefer. It is entirely up to you. I'm just going to leave these on the defaults. If you've got games or updates, DLCs, that kind of thing, and they are CIA files, you can install them using this option here. I won't be doing that in this video. So now let's sort out our game. So I have Pokemon X. So this is a 7Z file or 7-zip file. This is another form of zip file. Unfortunately, Azahar can't read zip files. So what we're going to do is we're going to press and hold, and we're going to tap our little 3 dots, and we're going to extract it. Whilst that's extracting, we're going to go to our ROMs folder. We're going to find that N3DS folder. And then we're just going to wait for this to extract, and then we're going to copy it over. Okie dokie, there we go. So one thing to note, we are going to be compressing these inside Azahar, which I'll show you as well. Because you can see that 7-zip folder is 873 megabytes, which is almost a gig. That's pretty chunky. And the unzipped version is 2 gig, which is even chunkier. So we will grab that game, we're going to press our scissors, and then we're going to paste it over to that folder. So if we go over to Azahar, and we pull down to refresh, there is our Pokemon X. So let's try it out. So when you first boot it, you're going to notice that, oh, we're only in a single screen, and also we've got this overlay, it's a little bit messy. So we're going to press our back button, and that will bring in this little options menu. First, we're going to disable that controller overlay because we absolutely do not need it. And then we are going to go to our landscape screen layout. So this is where you can cycle through the layouts. So the landscape screen is the top screen and the portrait screen is the bottom screen. However, in order for us to take advantage of this bottom screen, we need to actually enable it. So we are going to do that. So we'll close out of this, and then we'll go back to our options. We'll go to our settings, we'll go to our layout, and then for the portrait screen layout, the secondary display screen layout, we're going to tap bottom screen, and then this will take advantage of this. And then for the portrait screen layout, we'll just leave that on the default for now, and we'll see how that looks. There we go, so you can see it's taking advantage of both screens. Now you can customize these layouts if you so wish. However, for me, I think this looks perfectly fine. So there we go, we're in the game, it looks great. We can fast forward, we can turbo speed, get through all the usual Pokemon jibber jabber. Who's this hunk? So we've booted into the game and it runs perfectly, but what we're going to do is we're going to look at saving some space. So we press back and we scroll down, we close our game. So what we're going to do is we're going to press and hold, and this will give us like a little options menu for the game, so you can see how long we've played it for, the ID and the file. All we're going to do is press compress, and it's going to ask you where you want to save this ZCCI file. So I'm just going to save that in my ROMs folder. Annoyingly, it didn't default to the ROMs folder, but I think it does persist if you've got a few to do. So we'll go to N3DS and we will save that file. Shouldn't take too long, about 10-15 seconds or so. And there you go, you can see we have two. We have our 3DS file and our ZCCI file. Now if we go back to our file explorer, you'll see we've taken a 2 gig game down to 1.32 gig, nearly a 700 megabyte saving. So you imagine if you've got 10 games and you save that much, that's 7 gigs. So if you've got a model with low internal storage or your SD card is running a bit thin, then use this to save a ton of space across your games. I do believe you have to do it one at a time, which is a little bit annoying, but it's worth it in the end. So I'm just going to delete that old one, and then we'll just refresh, and then we'll boot into this one again. And there we are. If you like this video, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe. I'll be doing tons of videos about the AYN Thor over the coming months, so you don't want to miss any of those. I'll be covering emulators, front ends, apps, any little tips and tricks I find, and anything you guys want. So if you have any suggestions, recommendations, requests, then please pop them in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Bye now.